I'd like to show you why knowing your why is the start of your journey. Without a strong why, it can be so difficult to reach your maximum potential. My name is Dr. Jason Balara, and every week I meet with real estate investors and mindset specialists that are taking action in order to build a life according to their own terms. We will break down what drives successful people and allows them to achieve at such a high level. If you are a professional wanting to break through, or simply someone that wants to hear an inspiring story, the Know Your Why podcast is made for you.
Hi everyone, I'm Jason Balara, and this is the Know Your Why podcast. Today I'm here with Dylan Clark. Dylan is a 20-year-old real estate investment advisor and fund manager. Has come to the real estate industry with his passion to help people achieve their dreams. Dylan, first of all, thanks for coming on the show today. Appreciate you taking out the time. I know you got a busy day, so thank you for fitting me in there.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So tell us. I mean, I think the first thing that people are gonna sort of hear from that intro is 20-year-old, and we talked a little bit before even starting recording that is not the start of your journey. So give us a bit of your story, your background, kind of what got you to this point.
Yeah, I mean, just short in summary, I started off trading and investing, learning about finance as a whole at 14. My parents were never really good with money, living paycheck to paycheck, maxing out the credit card, spending money on stuff they didn't need to be spending money on, the typical American kind of story that you hear, unfortunately, with people in finances. I knew that I didn't want to go down that path. I wanted to, learn how to actually properly manage my money, invest it properly, make it grow so that way I don't have to get to the age of 40, 45 and, holy crap, what do I do? I have no idea, how to budget. I have no idea if I'm going to even be able to retire. I only have 10 years to kind of figure this out. Or, being in my world, in the investment advisor world, see plenty of people who are, 5 years away from retirement and they don't have anything. They're like, well, I plan on retiring at 65, and you have to be that unfortunate truth of that's not happening. You're gonna have to keep going a little bit further. Um, so that was the biggest reasoning behind, kind of why I got started. Um, from there, kind of kept growing the practice and the education side of things. Launched my own education platform at 16 to teach other people about personal finance and trading and investing in the securities markets. So kept growing my portfolio through there. That was technically my first online business. I had started there, grew that to over 10,000 people, and then from there went off and got my RIA 65 license to be able to invest and trade for other people, do financial plans, all of that, make that my primary career alongside of other types of investing and legal and compliance.
Amazing. I guess my first question is, you mentioned that your parents, weren't, maybe money management wasn't their strength. And okay, great. How did you? I recognize there's a bit of a teenage rebellion, right? Like everybody does
Yeah.
that, right? And sometimes you're rebelling against good things, and sometimes you're rebelling away from maybe negative behavior into sort of a better better path. But usually I feel like that comes with some type of inspiration or some other person or event that happened that sort of pushed you in that direction. Like as a 14-year-old to say, I'm going to get control of my finances, like that's not typical of what
Right.
what teenagers are doing at that point. Obviously, that's no surprise. But so how did you get into it? Like where did you start?
So I was messing around on Google one day, or an article had actually got published about the highest paid employee, the CEO of Google, and he has the highest W-2. And I think he made like $180 million from W-2 that year. So that kind of led down a little bit of a rabbit hole of how do I become someone like that? How do I get the highest paying job possible? Ended up learning about fund managers and how much they actually make in comparison to W-2. So that led me down that path. But coming out of all of that, I had come across someone called Dave Ramsey who deals with, a lot of personal finance things. And I just started listening to his podcast that he does, every day or every other day, whatever it may be, to kind of get that baseline foundation, and then from there, it's just deep diving into Googling all these terms, Googling all these different things that he's talking about, what other people are talking about online, counterpoints, objections, so on and so forth, and just kind of really just went down a rabbit hole.
And I would say, I mean, it's a great rabbit hole to get into. I guess it leads you in in a good direction. But you mentioned Dave Ramsey. Dave Ramsey, most of what he teaches is not fund management,
Right.
RIAs. Like that's sort of other end of the spectrum with him. Dave Ramsey's very much about no debt, sort of emergency funds, things like, which are good financial habits to have for sure. I'm not even saying like one is better than the other. Just
Right.
kind of don't fit together. So you didn't go to college for this, correct? No. Right. So you got your RIA 65, right? That's the
Yes.
certification program. And then what you said you sort of grew your education platform to 10,000 members. How did you approach that? What was your strategy there?
A lot of that was just Twitter is what that really was. We would post different types of educational content. So we've actually created several books and courses, online video programs and whatnot during that period of time, and would just go on and advertise and talk about it on Twitter. We would join a lot of different, basic, kind of like meetup groups, like everyone I feel in the real estate industry knows, pretty well. And if you aren't in meetup groups, start going to meetup groups, please. Um, but just a lot of networking is what it really was, and getting on board with a lot of other people who were highly followed and highly respected and prominent people in that financial Twitter space, connecting with them, and then kind of bringing everyone together as a big group.
So you said most of it was through Twitter. Were you doing virtual meetups, in-person meetups, and that are being sort of coordinated through Twitter? How did you structure that?
So the platform we actually used to communicate for everything was Discord, but our advertising and marketing was all done on Twitter. Everything was virtual and online. We did live trading or live trading during market hours for about the first 2 to 3 hours of the market open. Weekends we did a lot of education. We had 6 or 7 slots open between Friday evening and Sunday afternoon, where anyone can join, depending on your experience level, of course, and come in and learn and be educated about the topics that we're talking about. So that's how a lot of that worked. It was honestly some of the best times I think I've had so far. I still have relationships from that today that I hold very near and dear.
Oh, that's awesome. And I'm sure, I'm sure it's helping people, right? We talk on this podcast a lot. I talk with the guests. It's something that's not taught, right? It's not something that is in school at any level, really, high school, college. You have to specifically go out and seek it. And whether that's through, formal education or just what you're doing, which honestly may be the better way to do it at this point. There's so much, sort of free information out there available, or mentorships and teach educational programs within that specific niche that you're trying to get into. So I'm sure it had a very big impact on sort of people in the groups. And so you're kind of making the move to real estate, or you have made a move to real estate. What's the path forward from here?
From an investment standpoint, no, I don't plan on fully committing to real estate. Will I invest in real estate at some point? Probably, just because of the friends I've made. I want to support those friends and what they do. But as becoming a full-time, full-blown real estate investor, no, I can't do that. I I make better money elsewhere with my security side and the hedge fund that we run. But on the real estate side of things, what I do and what I aim to accomplish and achieve with real estate individuals is helping, first time starters get up and operational with their first syndication or with their first fund from a legal and compliance standpoint.
Okay. Obviously you're not an attorney. How
No.
are you able to, what services do you provide? How are you helping people with that?
So a lot of what I do is what a typical attorney does. It's the PPMs, LPAs, all the LLC registrations, Form D filings, Blue State Sky filings, once you raise capital. So everything standard that an attorney is going to do for you, I do the exact same thing. It's typically a lot cheaper to go with me. Just of course, I'm not an attorney, so I know a lot of people like having that, protection or that review that, the person does have their JD, they did go to law school and whatnot. But to me, that doesn't really matter. Law is open source. Anyone can read it, anyone can interpret it. There's hundreds of lectures online, from Harvard and other topics outside of law, from MIT and whatnot, to learn and understand different types of corporate structurings, how verbiage is written, how all the laws are written, how to read and interpret them. So while it's, more than acceptable, to only trust an attorney, and by all means, if that's your philosophy, go with it. Please do, and have an attorney review if you want. I don't think it's necessarily 100% critical that, something even as simple as legal docs, or entity formation documents. I don't think you have to be a lawyer to do that. Now, in a defensive court situation, of course, you do have to be a lawyer, and you maybe need to be a lawyer. I've defended myself in court once, and I did it better than the attorney that I hired. So there's pros and cons to that. At the end of the day, lawyers are just lawyers. They're other people, just like everyone else. They just have concentrated in one specific field. Doesn't necessarily make them good or qualified.
Sure. Yeah, they absolutely. I mean, within any profession, you have
Absolutely.
a right. The, every doctor is not created equal. Every lawyer is not created equal. Every what
Plumber,
yeah,
electrician,
any
everything. It doesn't
any field,
matter.
right? Any fund manager.
Yeah.
Some are probably more talented than others, and that's true. And I think the document prep, the filing of LLCs, those sorts of things makes total sense. You're not the only non-attorney, I think, that does those types of services. I guess my question would come in, if you're talking PPM on a syndication and we have now the SEC involved, and I truthfully don't know, like, what if it has to be an SEC attorney, or if you were to have, like you said, a court type of, if there was an actual issue, can that come back and be sort of a problem, just in terms of who prepared the documents, if it's not an actual SEC attorney? And I don't know the answer to the question. I don't know if you do.
It the way I structure things is, no, it can't come back on me. Now, if it, let's just hypothesize and say it does come back on me, then I have insurance to handle that. There were disclosures given, so on and so forth. But if in the event of a court situation, yeah, okay, I can no longer help you anymore. At least in the court side, because they won't let me, unfortunately. I'd love to argue, but they they won't let me do it at this point. So yeah, now we need to get a bar registered attorney who is SEC concentrated and focused to kind of step in and help out.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. I think, yeah. I mean, it's the individual's comfort level, right? If they,
Right.
as you said, if they feel that they're comfortable with having you perform some of those services and it saves them some money, I mean, that stuff, I mean, certainly adds up when you're
Yeah.
doing a syndication. All the legal fees and document preparation, it adds up quickly.
The way I look at that is I'm doing it for half the cost of a traditional attorney, and then on top of that, the whole reasoning behind me wanting to do it specifically with um, first time syndicators or first time fund managers is that way I'm able to explain everything in as much detail as possible and kind of do a good bit of hand holding. That way, the SEC doesn't get involved. Because I feel like that's a big problem with a lot of attorneys' offices is they will just take your money, they'll issue your docs, and they'll kind of send you on your way. You can ask a couple questions, here and there, but it's not a personalized experience, I think is my biggest personal vendetta against it all. I want to help people. I feel like people, if you're charging that much money to do something, you really should be, hand holding that person at least a decent bit, especially if they're new. It's already scary and terrifying to get in. You don't need to make it worse.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. I mean, it's a daunting portion of it. It's interesting as a syndicator, and your team is, whether it's attorney, whatever, your team's preparing these PPMs, and then you're sending those out to potential investors. And I've had investors that are like, yeah, I definitely want to be in, and then they see the PPM and they're terrified because it's 100 pages of why you shouldn't do this investment deal.
Right.
And so I've had to like walk a number of people through the PPM, and it's like it is a daunting process. So yeah, I can see that being nice to have a more a personal touch. And that's not to say that no attorneys do that, but I get where you're going with that. With your fund management is stock based, right? So
Yes.
It's not a real estate fund.
Is not a real estate fund, no.
Okay. What is your, I guess you don't have to you may not want to tell me your whole investing philosophy, but what is your fund offer to people? I guess, why would someone come and invest within your fund versus, another alternative out there?
So our investment fund actually works very similar in concept to real estate, which helps bridge, that kind of connection of stocks are scary. I only like real estate because I understand it. It's an asset that cash flows. We do the exact same thing. It's just a different asset. We have equity holdings that we then utilize, contracts that we issue against those assets to generate cash flow and generate income from them. And furthermore, with that being on the RIA side and the private wealth management side, we also have a bunch of tax strategies that we are able to implement and do for all of our investors that actually creates a zero income and zero capital gains tax environment.
Okay.
So, and we can do that for real estate too. That's not just that's just not stock specific, but I hear a lot of people talk about the things of real estate. It's an asset. You can generate cash flow, and I get my cost seg or my bonus depreciation. Well, there's a million and one vehicles out there that can accomplish the same thing. You just have to know where to look and put all the puzzle pieces together of the completely white puzzle. It's not an easy thing to do, but you spend a couple years at it, you can figure out how it works. I think that's the biggest misconception as well between real estate and equity investing is real estate's super safe. There's no real big downfalls, and the stock market is just this casino, and that's not the reality of what it is, in my opinion, in my experience.
Sure. No, it's interesting that you brought that up, because I was gonna, you earlier alluded to the, your ability to generate higher cash flow and returns, with the in stocks with what you're doing currently, rather than investing in real estate. I was going to ask you about the sort of tax side of that but if you're able to generate similar tax savings and offset some of those capital gains with what you're doing, then I think that's, I don't think there's any reason to only invest in one specific asset. I think there's a number of different values across different asset classes. I think that the big sort of, I guess, what we see, on the real estate side, what we see as a problem is that most people know, and if they're investing at all, invest in stocks. A lot of people don't know how to get themselves involved into real estate. So that typically is just a I don't know, accessibility problem more than anything.
Right.
So yeah, no, I mean, I think it's again, diversification is key, being across different asset classes, different strategies. I think it all makes a lot of sense. Well, I want to ask you kind of the questions that I ask every guest, Dylan. And always I start with, kind of the name of the show is Know Your Why. And so I always ask each guest, what is your why? What's driving you? You do have a very unique story in that, you're young and started all of this journey at a very young age. So I think I'd imagine your why, your sort of motivation behind it might be different than a lot of guests that we have that are just older. That's really just
Right.
comes down to, the more life behind them, less life in front of them, right? There's just so what is your why? What kind of keeps you going?
Two main things. First and foremost, being able to take care of at least my immediate family, and then the generations that follow. No one in my family up to this, well, one might be close, but no one in my family up to this point has ever become, a millionaire or left a large chunk of assets behind, set up trust, all, the whole deal. So first I want to be that first person to do that. My dad will never be able to retire, unfortunately. So I'm going to have to be the one to do that. So that's a big driving factor behind everything, is to hurry up and get him retired as soon as possible. Um, and then thirdly, I guess there's a three and four. Three, help as many other people succeed and achieve those same goals, because I think no matter who you are, each of us kind of has um that underlying want to kind of do that for them or their family or their future family. So being able to be that person who kind of thrust them forward into that world, or into this world rather, and help them along their way to achieve that. Absolutely. I will do that all day long, and I'll fight for that any day of the week without a second guess.
Awesome. uh Again, I'm very impressed by your sort of forward thinking. You know, I had to have kids before I thought about what I needed to do for kids. I wasn't thinking about how it was going to be, how it was going to look, in the future when they came. So, good for you, man. Really, really great, kind of outlook on the future. So the second question for you though is a little bit, outside the box, I guess, is just tell us something about yourself that maybe isn't common knowledge, special skill, a hobby, just something to let the listeners know you better. Obviously, you're very good with finances early on in life, but there must be something else in your life that's hopefully fun, some enjoyment.
Yeah, I actually love Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which is
Okay.
combat and submission grappling for those who don't know. I wrestled all through middle school and high school. I was to my I would say I was decent at it. Others may not agree, but I like to think I was pretty okay at it. And I enjoyed that a lot. It was a escape from a rough childhood and a rough upbringing, so that was kind of my outlet to let out anger and aggression, and it was therapy is what it really was. Um, so love that, but unfortunately that ended, after graduating high school, so kind of had to find another outlet for that, and that ended up being Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which I love, and I love competing. I love training there.
Cool. I feel like I'm gonna have to check that out someday. I have had a number of guests involved in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu at different, really at different levels. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, my goal is to win worlds this year. So
Oh, well, there you go. There you go. I confess I don't even know exactly what that means, but it
it's
sounds,
the world championship.
yeah, it sounds impressive. That's awesome. Um, when people hear this and they want to reach out to you, what's the best way?
Either LinkedIn. LinkedIn's usually the best. Can also throw a calendar link in the description of this episode, and people can just direct book from there. Not a problem.
Yeah, we can put that in the show notes so they have it. Um, Final question for you, Dylan. What is a piece of advice you would give to someone? And I'm really interested in your take on this, because yes, you're young, but you have sort of that different. I just feel like it's a very two different worlds where you were, in sort of quickly involved in, or I guess read about, sort of the Dave Ramsey method of finances, and then also being on the fund management side. Like, what advice would you give to someone who's starting out? What would you tell them, to help them get towards, their financial goals, their financial future?
Yeah, I don't agree with a lot of Dave Ramsey's things now, as far as at least the way he goes about things, but as someone to get that baseline understanding of terms and how things work and what you should and shouldn't be doing on a very basic level, I think that's a great place to start. He deals with everyday individuals all the time. So he speaks that language. He's not speaking big corporate finance language where you're just going to get confused and lost. Um, so I would start there. Google is the best resource you could ever have. Learn how to start doing research. I feel like everyone needs to, doesn't matter what field you're in, learn how to use Google, learn how to research and search for things, and conduct your own studies. Um, that'd be another thing to do. Um, don't listen to other people who say you can't do it because they're full of shit. They're just jealous that they can't do it. Um, you know, do what you have to do. It's your life, it's not theirs. Don't listen to them. My family doesn't even understand what I'm doing. So, are they supportive somewhat? Yeah, sure. Of course, they're going to be supportive of me. Do they wish I had gone to college and, was in college right now so that way I had the safety net? Sure, absolutely. But,
They'll understand
people
when
get
you
in the way. Yeah.
yeah, they'll understand when you retire them in a couple of years.
Yeah. I mean,
They'll get it.
yeah,
They'll
the
get it
biggest
then.
thing is people get in the way. So be careful who you listen to. Don't take everything to heart. If someone says, "Oh, you're dumb for doing this. You're taking all this risk." Just say, "Okay, that's awesome. I'm aware of this," and go about your day. You don't have to win their approval over. So,
Yeah.
when life gives you lemons, make orange juice and leave them wondering how you did it.
I like that. I like that. And I think, just to back to the sort of Dave Ramsey thing is what he teaches is very good for people that are looking for debt solution management, that sort of thing. Maybe early on financial literature, as you mentioned. There's nothing like what he teaches is really based towards that. What he doesn't teach, and if you go too far, I think into his sort of methodology, it would. And I'm not even convinced that he does everything he says he that you
No, he
should,
doesn't.
because I don't think he'd be. Once you get to the point of where you're trying to actually grow your wealth, and look at the future, now you have to start to, instead of being completely debt free, you have to learn how to use debt to your advantage and stuff. So I mean,
Right.
there's just it's just different stages. It's different
Right.
stages of
He's in
financial
that
health.
very beginning, stage where you are, making $40,000 a year, but you have a $12,000 a year car payment. You're living paycheck to paycheck. You have 75% credit utilization on your credit history, all of that type of stuff. He's more of the baseline understanding finances, understanding basic financial principles, how to avoid making a lot of common mistakes, and if you are in them, how do I work as efficiently as possible to get out of them. After that, then yes, you absolutely need to kind of graduate up to the next level.
Yeah, yeah, it's a great way to put it. It's a great way to put it. Well, listen, Dylan, this was awesome. Thank you for coming on the show and kind of sharing your background with us. I think it's really cool, and people will, I think, can learn a lot as far as especially, well, really any age. But I get very excited when I get to meet young people that are already thinking about their financial futures, because, as you said, like, a lot of people get to 40, 45 and they're like, oh crap, I haven't done anything, I wasted all this time. I was one of those people, and so now I just feel like I'm in catch up mode very frequent, almost always. I'm like, okay, if, and I think, and I'm like, I talk to people that are 25 and I'm like, if you start now, you don't actually have to do that much to be way ahead of where I am at this point, just because of the power of time and compounding your money and everything like that. So
Absolutely. I
it's
mean,
it
you start off at 20, 25, JV up. I know this is real estate podcast, so we'll stick with real estate. JV up with people who've been doing it for 5, 10 years.
yeah,
Because, you do that 10 times over the course of 5 years, that's just two deals a year. Isn't really a whole lot. You're definitely going to be a multimillionaire coming out of that.
yeah,
And that's 5 years of work.
yep,
And you can
yeah.
still work your normal job doing that.
exactly. Yeah. It's just, there's so much more opportunity. You maybe don't realize this, but you have more free time when you're younger. It's just like before you have a family and everything like that. That's the time to really kind of kick ass on finances, so that you're already set. When you do have a family, you're already set, and now you can spend time with them. So it's kind of it's really great to see what you're doing, in the way of sort of taking the reins yourself without a whole lot of direction. So good for you. Thank you again for coming on the show. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Great.
Awesome. And everyone listening, I'm sure you're going to love this episode. Please like, rate, and review so we can get more outstanding guests like Dylan. Thank you all.
I'd like to show you why knowing your why is the start of your journey. Without a strong why, it can be so difficult to reach your maximum potential. My name is Dr. Jason Balara, and every week I meet with real estate investors and mindset specialists that are taking action in order to build a life according to their own terms. We will break down what drives successful people and allows them to achieve at such a high level. If you are a professional wanting to break through, or simply someone that wants to hear an inspiring story, the Know Your Why podcast is made for you.